During World War I, the Lafayette Escadrille, a French aviation squadron predominantly comprised of American volunteers, were outraged by the massive conflict and atrocities committed by the Central Powers in Western Europe. The aviators made the decision to leave the United States because of the nation's isolationist stance. The squadron served France from 1916 to the February of 1918, before the United States joined the war. Credited with 40 victories and an estimated 100 more, the Lafayette Escadrille compromised their safety high above the Western Front, as foreigners revolutionizing early air combat.
2 years before the Escadrille was formed, famous American pre-war aces were already taking interest in joining the French Air Force. Future Lafayette Escadrille aviators such as Norman Prince, William Thaw, and Elliott Cowden had requested to join the French Air Force in 1914. All three of these pilots had higher priorities for protecting France, thus promoted them to leave the United States. It was hard to secure a position in the aviation corps due to the lack of airplanes available and potential German espionage. Thaw, Cowden, and Prince began proposing the idea of an all-American volunteer aviation squadron. They soon spread the word, trying to find as many American volunteers as possible to recruit for their squadron. In early April of 1916, George Theanault was made the leader of the Escadrille. George Theanault was a very disciplined pilot, always looking to better his flight skills. On April 18th, all of the pilots in the squadron were given orders to report to Luxor and to join the newly spawned all-American squadron, the Lafayette Escadrille. They were provided with 6 brand new planes. The pilots who joined didn't have to fight, yet they gave up their livelihoods in order to pursue a compromise to the threats jeopardizing Western Europe. "I begin to feel I am actively saving France," Victor Chapman said. Many pilots joined because they thought they had no purpose at home and that their aid would better help a war than a family. On May 20th, 1916, the Lafayette Escadrille arrived in Verdun. They began working on the 22nd, the day the French launched a large counterattack on the Verdun front. The Escadrille was a crucial part of the aviation force, as the Germans had launched a sizable aerial counterattack. The squadron was instructed to patrol at the altitude of 1,000 feet above Douaumont, where German artillery was accurately positioned. During the Verdun campaign, the Lafayette Escadrille established certain altitudes at which the pilots would fly. The first patrol at 1,000 feet were the pilots flying light fighter planes. The light bomber patrol was at 6,000 feet, and at 12,000 feet, the heavy bombers were flying. 1,000 feet would prove to be the most dangerous altitude, but the members of the Escadrille knew that this was the only way to effectively contest German forces, regardless of the many threats. The battle lasted for 3 days. On the last day, the Escadrille provided a fighter escort for the low-altitude bombers while en route to bomb Fort Douaumont, a crucial strategic point occupied by the Germans. After the battle had concluded, craters created by the shells covered the ground between the trenches. The French proved victorious by taking the fort. There were over 5,000 French casualties. The aftermath prompted the Germans to strengthen their airspace as to prevent aerial bombardment. This would challenge the pilots of the Escadrille for months to come. On the 24th of May, several new pilots joined the Escadrille at Verdun. One of those pilots happened to be Raoul Wolfberry. Wolfberry was a French-born American who found strength in his patriotism towards both France and the United States, but couldn't live to see the French suffer the effects of global warfare. The next day, Kiffen Rockwell brought down a German plane while conducting a routine sortie. Kiffen Rockwell was always fond of aviation and witnessed the evolution of powered flight before the war. Fighter pilot was a compelling career choice for Rockwell and several other Escadrille members. This will remain a historic victory as Rockwell became the first American to successfully bring down an enemy aviator. Satisfied with their victory, the Escadrille quickly began to retreat back to base. Most of the Escadrille pilots made it back to base. However, William Thaw was too focused on chasing another German to notice that the rest of his friends had withdrawn from the conflict. Thao was forced to abort the chase after he was shot in the arm with an explosive bullet. It was a slow journey back for the pilot. Missions such as these proved dangerous, as patrols could cover areas of 40 miles or greater. A pilot could easily find himself making an emergency landing behind enemy lines. On the 23rd of June, Victor Chapman was en route to deliver oranges to a pilot in the hospital. Chapman was only 23 when he left New York in 1914. After nearly 2 years of frontline combat, Chapman joined the Escadrille. He was one of the youngest men to serve in the squadron. During his flight, he was met with German aerial resistance. He decided to attack the squadron of German fighters. His motives for this were to avenge the pilot who was in the hospital. Chapman was quickly overwhelmed and shot down behind enemy lines. The plane broke as it fell. He died shortly after impact. Victor Chapman, only 26 years old, became the first American pilot to die in combat. Although his death was mournful, it also gave the other members a morale boost and a figure to remember and to fight for. The Escadrille began to score several victories against the Germans, even forcing an enemy aerial retreat at Bar-le-Duc. Between July 31st and August 8, 1916, Raoul Wolfberry had repelled several German aviation attacks and successfully brought down 4 fighters on his own. While his behavior posed risk to him and his squadron, he still insisted on completing every sortie, compromising his safety. On the 16th of August, Wolfberry was awarded a military medal for his skills and persistence during battle. Wolfberry was an expert with almost any machine he flew, and he quickly proved his worthiness. The action at Verdun began to decrease. German patrols were rarely seen, and most troops still fighting on the ground were moving to other areas of combat. The Germans had begun a massive retreat, extracting all of their men and machinery. By mid-October, the Escadrille had cleared the skies of any remaining Germans. On October 23rd, the Escadrille received orders to join Allied forces at the Somme. The Battle of Verdun would officially end in December, resulting in a massive French victory. The Escadrille saw little action at the Somme, as by September, troops from both sides had pulled out, resulting in a stalemate. On April 6, 1917, the United States officially joined the Great War on the side of the Allied powers as a response to the Zimmermann telegram. In the months that followed, all U.S. foreigners enlisted to serve other Allied nations would be absorbed by the U.S. Expeditionary Forces. The Lafayette Escadrille members were notified that they would be absorbed in January of 1918. However, many of the pilots remained in the same squadron, as all pilots, except Wolfberry, were placed in the 103rd Aero Squadron. Because of his many victories, Raoul Wolfberry was considered an ace and promoted to the rank of major. He was put in charge of leading and training the 94th Aero Squadron. Many of the aviators he trained became just as skilled as him, such as Captain Eddie Rickenbacker. Rickenbacker became the top United States ace with 26 confirmed kills. He stated, "Everything I learned from Wolfberry." Despite being one of the United States' most highly regarded aviators, Wolfberry ended up losing his life on May 19, 1918, when his plane combusted for no known reason. He died after exiting his machine with no parachute. Wolfberry met his fate at 33 years old. The Lafayette Escadrille inspired many Americans living in France to volunteer and risk their lives to fight for the Allied powers between 1914 and 1918. It was an organization of over 200 American volunteer aviators called the Lafayette Flying Corps. While the Lafayette Flying Corps was not an official unit like the Escadrille, it included every American volunteer aviator fighting in France before the U.S. engagement. Many of these pilots who joined were motivated to do so because of the men serving in the Lafayette Escadrille. These aviators provided the Allied powers with 199 confirmed victories against the German Empire, despite the fact that more than one-fourth of the pilots who served lost their lives to the onslaught of German fighters. While inspiring their fellow Americans to join the fight in France, the Escadrille received fame across Allied nations, as they were often included in news features. They were illustrated in several comic books during the 1930s. The Escadrille aviators were not only recognized for their fame in the media, but also as the first real American fighter pilots. Victor Chapman was the first American pilot to die in combat. Kiffin Rockwell became the first American pilot to destroy an enemy aviator. Raoul Wolfberry became the first American ace with 17 confirmed victories.
On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, all fell silent on the Western Front. The German Empire, along with the rest of the Central Powers, signed an armistice with the Allied powers, ending all engagements between the two opposing sides. The eerie sounds of Allied observer planes lingered in the distance. The aftermath of this conflict was a sight no man could ever forget. Over 10 million men and women gave their lives during the bloodiest conflict seen within the 20th century. The pilots of the Escadrille were considered to be the best of their time and would proceed to train the next generation of aviators.